Sometimes you gotta do one thing even though you mean to do another thing. But I'm not in any kind of trouble at all. None at all.
Killers of the Flower Moon is the best movie of the year.
My wife likes her nice things, so not as much as you do. You're picking a fight with the wrong person. If you're gonna make trouble, make it big. You gotta tell me what you told them. All of it, what you tell them.
I told them all of it.
All of it?
You're next.
Oh my God.
Have you told all the truths?
The devil is a lie. Tell the truth. The devil is a lie.
Hello, I'm Thomas Carruthers.
Oh wow. All right.
Hello, I'm Thomas Carruthers, and you say?
Hello, I'm David Whiting.
There you go, yeah. It's a trick question. We're doing a 2023 Spotlight series, David, because all in all, I thought 2023 was a rather excellent year. And one such film that goes without, that must be discussed, and is currently ranked number 3 / number 2. It's a tie between 2 and 3 currently in the Thomas Carruthers Awards ranking of the year. It's very, very, very close.
Really?
Yes, yes. I'm struggling with it quite a lot. Is the wonderful Killers of the Flower Moon, directed by Martin Scorsese, written by Scorsese and Eric Roth, from the book by David Gran. Now, this was my 3rd time watching the film. I am very, very, very enamored's the wrong word. I'm very taken by it. I really do think it is an incredible achievement in almost every way. I read the book. I read the book prior to watching it the first time, and the book is not entirely different. I mean, the history is the history.
Yes.
But this is where I want to. I mean, we're jumping straight into behind the scenes things, but it's been much talked about the different versions that this film could have possibly been, and the book is in 3 parts. The first part is almost entirely. It's more non-fiction, obviously, but the first part is from Molly's and Ernest's impression, and it's more of a whodunit, and we don't know that Hale is the ringleader. And it got to a point when that part of the book finishes and all of the pieces are slowly being brought together, it did take me by quite a surprise. Now, I don't know how that could have worked here if De Niro is still Hale, because you would have that terrible thing that haunts all of these movies of why is De Niro
playing just a minor character? There must be something more going on. Yeah.
Which I actually think, we're not talking about Oppenheimer, but everybody keeps talking about Rami Malek and like, oh, he must have. I actually thought the idea of casting a million other famous people made the Rami Malek final, I'm going to show up again. I would like Oppenheimer was the best man alive. I was like, oh, great. Rami. I believe I haven't seen it in a while. So
you were here.
Yeah, this might not be an exact quote because I haven't watched it in a couple of weeks, but I think he says, "Fuck Robert Downey Jr. Oppenheimer is the best." I think that's the exact line, but I can't remember.
Wow. Fuck Robert Downey Jr.
Oh, he's so very good. Anyway, that's not.
It was a good movie. It was a good movie, but it's not today's movie.
It's not today's movie, but very similar. Do you not think very similar?
Oh,
towering 3-hour epics with incredible lead performances, an incredible ensemble, heavy material. Somehow, I know you said this one felt long, but like
they do sit within the same world. Yeah,
moves incredibly quickly and then sort of naturally wraps up in a court for the past 40 minutes, and then ends with an incredibly thought-provoking final line.
Yeah, I thought it was quite good. I thought this one actually carried a little better pacing wise than Oppenheimer. Not that I was necessarily bored watching Oppenheimer, but I thought for a 3.5-hour movie, this one kept me pretty well engaged the whole time, and moved at a decent clip without being like overwhelming, I guess. Yeah, it's quite damn good. I felt like I was watching a Wild West version of Parasite. It's kind of what I thought when I was looking at it.
Well, that's the thing. Well, and then we come to the second part of the book. In the book, the second part is all Tom White, is all the FBI coming in, and it becomes a real procedural, and it becomes completely detective work, and Ernest and Molly kind of go into the background. Obviously, Molly is also being, incapacitated by her poisoning, so she takes a backseat in that middle half of the book, and then that part of the book becomes the trial, and it all comes to its conclusion. The thing that I don't think you'd be able to adapt in this version is the third part of the book, which is more straight journalistic fiction with David Gran, the writer, going to Oklahoma. It is Oklahoma, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah. And now, well, not now, obviously it was 2015 or whatever, and doing more research now, and his basic, it's an incredible book. His basic revelation is looking at the guardianship of all the people, and basically how most of the guardians had 4 different natives under their ranking or whatever, and that they were all dying of wasting illness, unknown disease, and
none of it gets investigated or looked into, or no one gives a crap. Yeah,
which is actually, I really did think this was a perfect film. I really did. But I was thinking throughout, when this film opens, well, not opens, but there's the early montage where we hear Molly's voice, and we go through about 5 of the murders that have already happened, and no investigation, wasting illness. And I thought that, and then I'd already read some criticism that the ending was astounding and completely took your breath away and knocked you out. And so I thought the ending was going to be that again for longer and really go into, and to be honest, I think, having watched the film 3 times and again being winded by the ending every time, I think this is a far better ending, because I mean, we can look at lots of people have been very outspoken, particularly Native American. The 2 big quotes have sort of come out against the film, and I think both have been rebutted quite well by people involved in the film, and it's by no means my place to say as a white guy. But there, like, let's start with this one. So the star of Reservation Dogs, an actress named Devery Jacobs, and she described being Native, watching this movie was fucking hellfire. Imagine the worst atrocities committed against your ancestors, then having to sit through a movie explicitly filled with them, with only the respite being 30-minute long scenes of murderous white guys talking about planning the killings. And then she goes on to praise Lily Gladstone as an absolute legend. All the incredible Indigenous actors were the only redeeming factors of this film. Give Lily her goddamn Oscar. I completely agree that Lily Gladstone does deserve an Oscar, but
and she was fantastic. Yeah,
but go on, sir.
No. I mean, I can see where the complaint comes from. It is sort of the story of the Osage people as told through the lens of this group of white guys that are murdering all of them. I would have liked to see more of sort of Molly's point of view and that sort of thing. She was sort of set up as being the smartest person in the room at the beginning. She can obviously read right through Ernest Burkhart's, kind of flirting. She knows exactly why. I guess for me, it felt like she was being set up as someone who was playing an even longer con than William Hale was, sort of thing.
Yeah.
And I guess I spent a lot of the movie sort of waiting for the other shoe to drop. kind of waiting for her to be like, well, I knew all along and this was my plan. But it just seemed like instead she went from being the smartest person in the room to just sort of trusting this man implicitly, partly because she had no choice. She was dying and poisoned. And she does make the trip all the way out to Washington, D.C. and speaks to the president. And that is the thing that, gets federal eyes onto this investigation, which is fantastic. But I would have liked to see her character get something more, I guess, just in that she was this quiet, smartest person in the room kind of character. And then they never sort of went anywhere with that. I was expecting her to have some sort of grand plan.
But the problem is, this is the problem though, David, isn't it? Is that, yes, you could add some sort of revelation scene, but that's
the history's the history.
That's the thing. And so many current movies, and I've said this before in a couple of reviews, but there's been a recent sort of wave of sort of retroactive history movies and that sort of thing. And not in the Tarantino sense, not like killing Hitler. I just mean like a lot of period dramas where minorities or women in particular have these scenes of grandeur and have these scenes of big speeches and talking up, and in so many ways it rings false, because that is the tragedy of what is happening, is that she did, for what it's worth, she did trust him implicitly. And I was literally talking to somebody yesterday and they said, why did we spend 30 minutes on this and then we only spent 30 seconds on Washington? Personally, that's for me the entire fucking point. The fact that there's all this build-up and it's her, and it could be her last dying gasp all the way to get to Washington, and it's a 30-second scene of
conversation with the president, and he kind of gives a non-committal yes, maybe we'll do something.
And he just says, well, thank you very much. And they've bought the train, or bought the train passage. They didn't buy the whole train. They really do have a lot of money. They bought a train. No, they're doing this incredible build up, and that whole meeting scene prior, and build up, and then we get there. We don't even see the president's face, and in many ways, that's a lovely visual way to translate that. It's just a shake of the hand, and thank you.
I thought it was a great way of sort of highlighting just how desperate a lot of these sort of Indians situation is. And it was I think the movie did a great job of kind of highlighting how things didn't really get better for Indians after, sort of the genocides, quote unquote, finished. Well, they just continue to get screwed over in new and interesting ways.
Exactly. Going back to that comment from the actress from Reservation Dogs, Gladstone reacted saying, the process of making this movie gave a lot of people a chance to speak. Ultimately, Osage reaction is what I care most about. Her reaction is a response to a lot of trauma that particularly Native women feel seeing these things for the first time. I had a lot of time acclimating myself to the script. The Osage people have had their lives to understand this history. And to be frank, and it sounds brutal and it sounds ineffective and possibly crude, but and maybe there was criticism at the time, I've not gone back, but nobody is saying that Schindler's List is an exploitive film for showing the extreme violence that film does, and on a not grander level, but on a more level, I can't even speak. There is a million times more violence shown on screen in Schindler's List, just as graphically. And to be frank, and also there is more than enough time spent with Ralph Fiennes when people are talking about this movie, being just about the evil white men plotting. We spend an awful lot of time with Ralph Fiennes. We spend a lot of time with when he's sort of seeing a more, human's a dangerous word, seeing a different side to him when he's with the I think she's black, the maid who he falls in love with or something.
I guess I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt there.
No, you're fine.
I guess I would say what this movie does better than what, say, Schindler's List did is that I think Schindler's List, I don't have a problem with the violence in it. I think that's naturally part of the times. I think it is sort of a movie, kind of like Oppenheimer in a way, that seeks to sort of humanize and sympathize this yet another white man who's kind of,
Yeah.
yes, Schindler did end up saving many, many people, and worked very hard to get as many people out of Nazi Germany as he could, but ultimately was still a member of the Nazi Party who still subscribed to many of their beliefs prior to sort of having a change of heart. And it's a movie that humanizes him and his viewpoint, and sort of like encourages us to sympathize with, with him, I guess, in a way, in the same way that Oppenheimer sort of does. I'm not saying that either one of these men are like objectively evil or, completely wrong in that way. Whereas I would say that Killers of the Flower Moon, while it does focus very often on sort of like Robert De Niro and Leonardo DiCaprio's characters, they're not sympathetic characters whose points of view we empathize with. It's more sort of like a giant building. You have to see how heinous all the things that they've done are, so that last hour and a half really hits when Leonardo DiCaprio has to come to his wife and essentially admit that, yes, I love you, and I also was murdering your entire family the entire time. And it just wouldn't land in the same way if we hadn't seen just how heinous all the things that they were doing leading up to that were.
And also, I think it's we can break this down, and maybe you can see this as a cop out, or maybe you can see this as gross understatement. But Ernest is not a particularly clever man, and is easily manipulated, and is easily led by feelings, and is easily led by greed. And so I completely believe that he is in love with Ernest. Sorry, in love with Molly. I completely believe that his uncle can, completely manipulate him into doing these things. I can also completely believe that he doesn't. The first thing that the only real thing where we see him. Well, no, sorry, we see him beat up the private investigator. But the only one that we see him sort of jerry-rigging is the killing of Bill Smith. And we see Bill Smith not liking Ernest. And there are multiple scenes prior of Bill and Ernest not getting on, and Bill Smith sort of snooping, sneaking him out and sort of being, not liking him, and, well, for your taste, maybe, and all that sort of thing. And so you can understand, Ernest, a man of, even though this is not an impulsive act, I'll kill Bill. Yeah, fuck it. Bill's awful. And you know what? Bill's terrible because he remarried straight away. He really does just want the money. Whereas I love my wife. I'll kill Bill. Oh, I do have to blow up my sister-in-law. That's all right. The money's going to a good play. I can see. And apart from that, everything else is just sort of slightly pushed in or pushed out. Here's another thing, and we'll not get rid of, but mention some of the criticism now before we actually talk about the film, because to be frank, I just every piece of criticism is slightly getting on my nerves at this stage, and because and I know that you feel the same way, but when we are in the ultimate last stage of Martin Scorsese's career, and when he eventually passes, I don't think any of us are going to go back and say, yeah, actually, I really would have preferred a 90-minute tight version of Killers of the Flower Moon, or anything like that. I remember people talking about Wolf of Wall Street and be like, it's too long. Are you fucking kidding me? People watch Wolf of Wall Street all the time now. And they, and they watch it, sure, they watch it in 2 parts or whatever they need to do. But that movie fucking flies by, and that's 3 hours. And we should be thankful. Now, it's not to
let us all kneel at the Church of Scorsese and thank him and pray for forgiveness for our sins. In the age of content, there is one cinematographer left.
Christopher Coates. Was an Osage language consultant on the film, and this was the one that really burnt the house down, because this was at the premiere, and so far nobody had really been sort of negative about the film, and then this guy Christopher Coates, who worked on the film, says this on the premiere, and I'm like, oh no. Oh, no. He says, as an Osage, I really wanted this to be from the perspective of Molly and what her family experienced. But I think it would take an Osage to do that. Martin Scorsese, not being Osage, I think he did a great job representing our people, but this history is being told almost from the perspective of Ernest Burkhart, and they kind of give him the conscious and kind of depict that there's love. But when somebody conspires to murder your entire family, that's not love. That's not love. That's just beyond abuse. I think
Well,
the
I
hardest
don't think that.
part, yeah, the hardest rebuttal is that unfortunately he did, he did love her.
Well, I don't think they tried to argue that Ernest's got a healthy view of their relationship.
No.
I don't think at any point in the movie I don't think they're ever trying to paint Ernest as a good guy. He's a simpleton who's been manipulated by his incredibly predatory uncle, and is being used almost as much as Molly is, and is disposed of as soon as he's no longer useful, as soon as he becomes a liability, essentially. By the way, loved seeing Brendan Fraser come back in as the super slimy lawyer for Robert De Niro.
Well, we can throw that. I've got one last tab open. I've got one last tab open, which is more criticism, and then we can get rid of criticism and start praising the film. Because everyone said that Brendan Fraser was shit, and I was like, "What are you talking about? He's clearly
fantastic.
He's clearly a bombastic lawyer, and
here to distract and obfuscate and make this trial as messy as possible, because the fact is William Hale killed all of these people and there's a mountain of evidence against him. So the only way you're going to win is by making it a sham trial, essentially.
And somebody asked Scorsese about this, which I thought was incredibly rude. And he said, we thought he'd be great for the lawyer, and I admired his work over the years. And really for us, when we heard that, he brought the whole scene down on Leo. It was perfect. And he had that girth. He's big in the frame at that time. He's a wonderful actor. And he was just great to work with. And then the Apple TV Twitter noted a page from the actual book, which is, "This man is my client." And it's got this exclamation mark. And they put, "Note the exclamation mark." Very sassy Apple TV Plus Twitter.
I just love his line. "If you do this, you're basically killing your uncle. Do you want that?"
They are giving you the rope.
You hang yourself with. Do you see that?
He's saving you, dumb boy. Yeah, I don't know how you can't watch that and go, yeah, completely. I think it's just because he's Brendan Fraser and he's a name. Like, if that was just another actor who gave the exact same performance, I don't think anybody would comment. Anyway. Okay, so then we talk about this final thing before we actually talk about the film that we got. The original script, as written, was told from the perspective of Tom White. And it was going to be a more straight whodunit detective drama. And Leo was to play Tom White. And by some sort of sick, twisted intervention, COVID happened. And around that time, Leo was talking to Scorsese about the script. They were all heavily working together on the script. They were all very passionate about the project. And they said, and Leo said, allegedly, "Where's the heart? I think I should be Ernest. I think it should be about Ernest and Molly instead." Now, I think that's an incredible decision. Because, as I said in my review,
we've seen a whodunit before,
and also as we've seen in my as I wrote in my review, this is ultimately the fact not putting Tom White at the start, at the start of this story and at the front of this story. If it was, this would be a movie tantamount to, this wasn't this wasn't a trial and conviction about success, because as David Graham's book goes on to say, there were 10 other Hales. Yeah, there were 10 other Hales. Hale was just the one who was most obvious and using dynamite and being a bit, well, they were all stupid and evil.
Being a bit cheeky with it.
Yeah. The guy for the coin flip guy who was also in the Ku Klux Klan and is on the trial and incredible act and is Molly's guardian, and he says, "You're making yourself too obvious."
Sort of the systemic, just inability for these people to get any kind of help, because the very people they would go to help for are the same ones that are killing them off. Just I don't know. I thought it was did a fantastic job of kind of highlighting the weaknesses of sort of the system and how they affect this community of people. And also, I mean, I love Jesse Plemons as Tom White, but I feel like we've seen that story before.
I think there was just enough. I also enjoyed, I thought, again, this is where the sort of, when you were saying, when you look at the time watch and realize there's an hour and a half left. I really love all the actors in that sort of FBI group, the undercover detective who is native himself, played by Tatanka Means.
Tatanka Means, yeah.
And Pat Healy. I love Pat Healy's scenes when he's with the doctor, and it's the first glimpse we've had of quote unquote non-bullshit people coming into, and slowly but surely the walls feeling like they're coming in. And
I love that whole initial kind of questioning of each of these major suspects as Jesse kind of comes along, and they each get real hardball questions for the first time. They're not able to just kind of wave it away with a quick, "Oh, you should talk to this guy. He'll know. That'll get rid of you."
Possibly, I didn't think that it could have been intentional. I don't know, but another great scene where De Niro is playing a truly, truly awful sort of gangster ringleader being shaved and interviewed by people like the Untouchables. Lovely little.
I don't think Robert De Niro will ever be able to get away from playing a gang leader.
Well, I think, and this is another thing that I think has come up critical wise, that I've heard so many people say, and to be honest, I think it's quite reductive and wrong, is people saying like, oh, well, Scorsese just couldn't get away from making a violent gangster movie. And I'm saying, if you see this as some sort of, where is the joy in this violence? Where is the gangster conspiracy, conspiring talk?
I guess I still watching it thought this is a gangster movie, but it's sort of the gangster movie stripped bare of sort of the bombast and the romanticization of the crime. I still think Robert De Niro is still essentially playing a mafia boss. He's just a much less competent one. He's a much more cutthroat kind of Midwest one. He's a mafia boss who doesn't have to worry about city police or the judiciary system, because he is the judiciary system. He is the local police. He is, and I think it highlights kind of the unique fabric of sort of like the American Midwest at the time, where you sort of had this clash between the pioneer kind of Wild West spirit, the law is not out here, we can do whatever we want, and the sort of encroaching modern times of you can't just do whatever the hell you want and get away with it. This is no longer just Osage country. This is the American federal government stepping in now.
And it's always the white people.
Interesting clash.
It's always the white guys who are saying, "Well, this is Indian country. We go with their rules." Exactly. Yeah. And it's always to obfuscate the terrible, terrible things that they're doing, like the doctors. The absolute evil scoundrels of those doctors, and they're like,
the sound of him cutting her skull open, of cutting Anna's skull open, is just sickening.
And Molly putting her in. It's incredible work. Well, let's see. Let's just go from the beginning. So we open with the burial, and in many ways it can be seen as sort of a burial of the old ways, and they're lamenting and they're crying, and then we get Oil Boom and the name of the track, and we get this incredibly sort of it's reminiscent of Wolf of Wall Street, and it's money and it's excess and it's everybody's dancing and it's oil and it's a great track. The score, the wonderful score by Robbie Robertson, now since passed, and a long-time collaborator with Scorsese, working here, a native himself, and the music is. But after this point, I've listened to the score quite a bit, and it's just an incredibly melancholic, dirging, paining, beautiful score. But here is where it's at its most, bombastic and loud, and burning, and it's got that guitar, and it gives us in 5 minutes a nice sort of, wow, this is a great time, and you get that sort of impression of a gold rush type world, and everybody's traveling there, and then we get which actually, I was not worried. I was never worried, but like we get a black and white to color fade onto the bus, which I actually thought was really out of didn't work for me, and I was like, oh, okay, 5 minutes
Okay,
in.
Martin.
Couldn't do a cut.
He's an auteur. He's an auteur. Don't you understand?
Well, this scene's in black and white, and this
the
scene's in color.
cinema.
And then we meet Leo on the bus, and he's come to town, and then we get this sort of one shot. He gets off the bus, and we're seeing the town, and we're seeing all the madness of what is currently happening in Osage country. And he's like, "Wow, this is great! You know, I'm fresh from the war. Wow, look at all this excitement and all this money." And
again, one thing, and I really liked in sort of like that introduction to the town, is we got to sort of see the reversal of roles, in that the richest people walking around town were Osage. And you see all of these like white men groveling at their feet essentially for just a few extra bucks. And
white chauffeurs and
white chauffeurs, white shoe polishers, white shop clerks, and all the people walking around just lending out money and cash are, these rich kind of Indians. And then you get sort of the reverse, where you still see how even here, where they've managed to work their situation into something relatively favorable for some of them, there's still the ones that have to have a guardian in order to claim any amount of benefits or care of any kind. So we see that there's still yet a split between the good Indians and the not so good Indians, sort of thing. And even here, where they've managed to sort of take some manner of power back, they are still ultimately like captives of the U.S. government in a way.
The restricted and unrestricted thing was a part of the book. I mean, obviously the book contains terrible murders, but the unrestricted restricted thing really got me. I was like, what the hell? I don't even. How do they devise this system? How do they? And it's all based on like full blood and land ownership.
It's all just like some fucked up eugenics shit.
And I was like, what the hell is going on? And I think that's another thing. I mean, talking about the importance of this film, this is not history that gets talked about. We talk about the huge disasters. We talk about the Holocaust. We talk about the slavery epidemic. We talk about everything, but we don't necessarily talk about the sort of smaller genocides, shall we call them? I don't know.
Well, I would say that the genocides of the Indians are sort of always relegated to like this period in the far past when Americans first arrived, and we act like it's not something that's still going on. And I mean, there's hundreds of Native women and children that go missing every year, even now, that never get investigated. They're kidnapped, taken, trafficked right off of reservations away from their families, and never gets investigated, never gets looked into, never gets touched because they're Indians. So I think it is one of those things, one of the many things in American history that doesn't get talked about very often, is just how, one, the Native Americans were essentially genocided right off of their own land, and two, we're still doing it in a lot of ways.
I mean, I don't want to get, we're living in a terrible world at current, and I do think that there is something to be said that there are 3 major movies in this Oscar season rather: Killers of the Flower Moon, Zone of Interest, and Oppenheimer, that are bringing sort of the facts and the truths about mass murders and the horrors that we commit in war. And I don't know how one can't look at it with some sort of perspective.
Yeah, one would hope.
Exactly. And then we get De Niro. I'm going to say this now. De Niro is absolutely fucking astounding in this, and I don't want anybody to say that his nomination is some sort of let's give one to De Niro or whatever, because he didn't get nominated for Irishman, which he was also great in, but this is the best he's been for me in.
I thought, he was fantastic. He was slimy. He was manipulative. he could be super sugary sweet while
Yeah.
having like a rancid core the whole time. Yeah, he was sickening and perfect as William Hale.
Yeah. And I do think there is something lost in that, and maybe I'm just, you didn't feel this way perhaps, but I just remember reading. I was on the train at the time and getting to that reveal that it was Hale, and that sort of gut dropping out, and I do wonder if that could have been played with a little bit more. But then I think the minute, I don't know. There is something to be said about seeing the mechanism, similar with Zone of Interest. You know, we've seen the atrocities in the case of Zone of Interest, but we have never seen the mechanism. And this movie has both.
I think it would have been tough to pull off the whodunit as the book did, just because, the moment you see Robert De Niro taking in Leonardo DiCaprio's character, kind of taking him under his wing, sort of welcome to Oklahoma, welcome to Osage country, son. I think alarm bells would have been going off that, like, this is probably the guy behind all of it because it's Robert De Niro. I think the way they did it, or the way that Martin did it in this, did lend itself well to kind of that weird gut-dropping feeling, in that you get the sense right away that this guy is really just after the oil money, really just after these people. But then the next scenes all build up how core and how essential he is to this community and just how trusted he is. So in a way, you get that same sickening, dropping feeling in your gut, in that you've just seen that this guy is not to be trusted, that he is bad news, that wants nothing but these people's money. And then the very next scenes are you realizing just how essential he is to this community, essentially.
The fucking scene. The fucking meeting scene where he's like, and I will give $1,000 to anybody who has information, which means you have to come to me.
To me. Come to me first. Let me know so that I can have you bumped off.
and then the chief, or the guy leading the meeting, is like, thank you, Mr. Hale, and sort of unprompted, because he feels a need, and because at that stage, that's what he believes. He's like, Mr. Hale has given us so much over the years, and I'm like, oh my God, I mean, it's understandable. And then I mean, a real bottom dropping out moment later when they're finding out that Anna was pregnant, and I'd forgotten this in the book, and he's like, you know, did they talk about Byron? No. Me? And like, such a tiny moment, and it's never brought up again. And it's like, oh my God, he's fucking them as well. He's fucking Anna. I mean, what the hell is this man doing, and how did he get away with it for so long? Incredible stuff.
These white men are dangerous. And then the moral of the story.
Indeed. And then we get this first scene with Leo and De Niro before we take our first break, where we get the, you know, well, I do love that money, sir, and you know, and it's a sort of, you know, it's a thesis.
Money flows freely here now. Well, I do love that money, sir.
You know, money flows. What type of women they got over there? And he's like, you know, do you like red? And already he's planting the seed of, marry one of these girls, and yeah.
And he's feeling out, you know, Ernest. He's just like, how stupid are you? Do I even have to really try, or can I just basically tell you to go get married to one of these ladies and you're going to do it? And he realizes, oh yeah, you're so dumb. I can just tell you what to do and you'll do it.
You're goddamn right. We're going to take our first break and then we'll be back, because that scene ends with Hale once again talking, speechifying. They are the most beautiful people in the world. Hard cut to brutal poisoning, which was incredibly effective. And we'll be back in 1 second. And we're back. Okay. So, yes, as we talked about, again, Hale is talking and speechifying about how the Osage are the most beautiful people in the world. Hard cut to writhing in pain, frothing at the mouth. He's been poisoned. And then we cut to black and white, grainy footage, and he was an American football player. And this incredibly powerful young man who has just been leveled completely by the means of this cartel, or whatever you want to call it.
Well, and it shows, like, even people who attempt to embrace, like, sort of the white culture that has moved in around them, this American football star, they're not safe for having embraced these things or having tried to be like a quote unquote good Indian.
Well, the
That
next one we see the housewife. She's become an American housewife. She's raising a child. She's dressed in, quote unquote white clothing, a nice pretty
Mhm.
summer dress, shot dead in her front yard and made to look like a suicide. And
Yep.
it, to be honest, it felt like I don't know if you've seen JFK or I'm trying to think of another, but certain political movies who I just have no qualms about saying this is what happened. Like
Mm.
there is no, proof that that was not a suicide. Obviously, everything points to the fact that it was probably fixed. And
Yeah.
this movie just doesn't care and will say, yeah, you know what?
It
It
has no
probably was. It definitely was a
it
murder.
has no qualms about being frank about the victimization of Indians on the reservations
Mm,
and within the reservation system, which I think is refreshing because I think a lot of other movies and a lot of other directors would have left it more ambiguous or would have kind of made it so that the ultimate question of the movie was it all suicides or was it actually these
yeah.
guys? Whereas this movie is very frank and open with the fact that no, these people came in and victimized an entire community and essentially got away with it.
And you can either look at that as making the movie about white men, which is by all definitions true, sure. But if that's your one takeaway, if showing how this having a part of this film, just showing how the mechanism worked and how these outrageously, ranging from stupid to just maniacal people went about a series of murders and showing how they did it. If your takeaway is, well, you made the movie about white men,
Well, I think the movie to me was about sort of white supremacy, funnily enough.
yeah,
And if Leonardo DiCaprio, Ernest Burkhart standing in for the kind of clueless lower class white people that are ultimately used as tools of this system
mm,
by those who know how to actually work it and who actually sit at the top of things like William Hale does. I mean, if
yeah,
William Hale is the predatory kind of white business interest that is essentially propped up on ideals of white supremacy, but dresses it up in nice language and fixing the community and all of that sort of thing. Ernest Burkhart is the boots on the ground idiot who doesn't really realize the
yeah.
wider implications of what he's doing. He's just trying to make a life for himself and make some money,
And it's like the KK clan, the
The Ku
Ku
Klux
Klux,
Klan,
yeah,
yeah. I mean,
and
marching straight
yeah,
down the street and then, in the 4th of July parade, is it? Or
we,
um,
we can live with Indians. We all like Indians, but those blacks, I mean, Jesus,
those blacks, yeah.
where do you draw
And
the line? You know?
yeah, and the sort of and I think this whole movie was ultimately about white supremacy. I mean, you even had the mentions of Tulsa,
Yeah,
the quote unquote race riots,
yeah,
what was really just the burning down of an entire black community by a white mob.
yeah,
um I think it couldn't be more clear that this movie is about white supremacy and how even well-intentioned people within that system are ultimately the tools of oppression,
yeah.
and how oftentimes the ways that this system affects people are not so clear and black and white as just like, well, this person was just a racist and went out and murdered somebody. It
Yeah.
can be that simple, but oftentimes, the tools of this system are much more subtle than that. And I think this movie kind of highlights that.
I'm not gonna say that it's the complete truth and he truly believes it because I don't believe that that's the case. But in the cell, and the fact, like at the very end, I mean, we're jumping the internet, but like in the very end, when Hale is talking to Ernest and he's like, "They love me. I gave them their streets. I brought them into the 21st century." There's a part of me of like, oh no, he genuinely still believes this.
Yeah.
He genuinely still believes that just because he killed one family, Henry Rowe, killed
But he
quote unquote
sees
a handful of people.
he sees himself as a steward of this
Mm,
community. I'm the white man here to protect them, and that money would be better served in my bank account than theirs because they don't know how to use it properly, and I'll
yeah,
be the one that actually knows what to do with it, sort of thing.
exactly.
I think there's another line. One of my favorite parts of the movie. I
Mm,
guess I'm jumping ahead myself
you're
as far
fine.
as like favorite 5 minutes, but when Leonardo DiCaprio finally decides to take the deal after his son has died,
Mm,
um, and he just says they don't support you, Bill. Like
yeah,
they're not behind you anymore. And William Hale says, I think I've got it. Oh yeah, there might be insurrection for a while, but then people forget that. They don't remember and they don't care. It'll be another ordinary everyday tragedy.
Yeah.
It's
not.
You know,
it's not ordinary. It's not. It's not
ordinary.
And I really need to. We need to change the comment. I mean, well, we're recording this after nominations, not before the actual Oscars, but after nominations. So we know that Leo didn't get in. Can we please change the conversation around this performance? People saying, "Oh, his dumb face for 3 hours." I really do think this is really great work from Leo, and this is where we go back to the chronology of the film, and we can go back to where we were, because we now get into a sort of 20-minute love affair, sequence where I genuinely believe the relationship and the love and the flirting, and in the car, and he's picking up the bits of Indian and he's researching, again, all for nefarious deeds. But in this 20 minutes, we feel like it's a genuine love. And, the car flirting, and she does that. She speaks Akasike, and he goes, I don't know what you say, but it must have been Indian for handsome devil.
Coyote.
Yeah. And then, it's funny and it's nice and it's believable. And
the fact that by the end of the movie, he can fully speak Osage, his children are getting, one thing I did like, and just kind of a way that I think they marked the passage of time and the exploitation of this community really well was the naming ceremonies and the funerals, where at the very beginning, the first naming ceremony we see where the baby receives their Osage name, which is something very sacred within their culture. The whole sort of like baby shower, I guess, the whole christening party, if you want to call it that, is mostly made up of Indians, like mostly made up of Osage, who are there cheering on this baby in traditional ways. It's very much like the heart and soul of this community are the Osage. And by the final naming ceremony for Ernest and Molly's last child, the whole wedding party, save from like 2 or 3 faces, is white.
And the final burial, you could see that because Ernest is Christian or whatever, and that maybe they wanted more of his ways but the burial, they are all in black. They are at a regular Christian cemetery, and they've got the traditional apple from the Indian side of things, but they are just burying a casket.
Other than that, that's all there is of it.
It's very Godfather Part 2, and the wonderful Italian bouncy wedding, and everyone's having a great time in Part 1, and then this Part 2 opens with this incredibly clinical American bandstand. Mr. Corleone has granted me, and anyway, we're not talking about Godfather Part 2. But I love Godfather Part 2. We're talking. Okay, so even then, and I remember seeing the first trailer, and the first trailer was built around him reading the book and, can you find the wolves in this picture? And that incredible final shot in the trailer, which is the one later when he walks into Hale's office and it's all the white people and everyone's there. And can you spot the wolves in this picture? I remember seeing that for the first time and going, fuck, this is going to be incredible. And
how anyone could have missed that this movie was so obviously about like white supremacy and the dangers of even those who claim to be like white allies. They are still ultimately a part of that system and may, in ways that they don't even understand, be working towards your downfall, essentially. I don't know. For me, the whole moral of the story is don't trust these white guys.
and that's the great horror, isn't it? I mean, I this is why, I'm the guy who defends, 5-hour movies. I get it, hashtag me or whatever. But like, if we don't get a really long buildup of their love and romance, and I genuinely believe that we take the time and spend the time with them, that we never question really, or shouldn't, or the like. Then we get, and then we get the, and even during all of this flirtation, Ernest is still robbing and gambling, and I love money, and he's bouncing on the table.
I do love that money.
and then he loses on in the gambling, and then we get this table scene, which I mean, it was very well memed that there was only one photo from this film for a good 3 years, and it was that table. And then we finally get it in the actual film, and it's this beautiful scene of the sort of clashing of cultures, and and listen to the storm. You have to listen to the storm, let it pass, and you go, oh, the wind's really picking up. No, be quiet.
No, just quiet.
And it's tremendously effective. And then it's not long before we're into the wedding, and here we are. Yeah, the wedding, and you're gonna marry me. You're gonna marry me, Molly. And the big, and again, two incredible De Niro moments in this wedding is when he's doing the speech. I've known Molly and her sisters ever since they were making a whole lot of trouble, and everyone laughs. And again,
except Molly.
Except everybody's laughing except Molly. And he goes, and I remember Molly's father, who always used to say, no, call me Johnny. And I didn't. I called him by his real Osage name. And it's all this sort of, what's it called?
Fake allyship.
Yes, yeah. And this feigning of, and then even darker when he walks over to the sister, Minnie, I believe is the first sister who dies. And walking over to her, and she's with Jason Isbell, her husband, her first husband. Well, no, anyway. And he goes, have you got the medicine, Minnie? Have you got that? And she's just crying because she sees him as this godlike figure of, oh, he might be able to save me. And then he does this huge performative native prayer.
Yes.
Sort of gospel-like.
Sickening.
Incredible stuff. And then go straight to the funeral. Again, the movie is full of all these incredible little moments. At the funeral, what does he do? Gives Annie his flask because he knows that maybe she could just kill herself because she's crazy drunk lady.
It's a great way of showing he's constantly playing a longer con. He's constantly on his grind, I guess.
Maybe I don't need to deal with
at the
it,
wedding.
yeah.
I think I remember that moment just thinking, oh, this sick bastard, because I mean, yeah, and also I mean it's also I think references really well how sort of white settlers used alcohol against the Native Americans in a way, knowing that they would have no real tolerance for it or resistance to the disease that is alcoholism.
Yeah. And then we get, and then I love the sort of gradual nature of his scenes with Ernest. And he's just waiting for Ernest to sort of click on. Because he's never going to say, look, buddy, we're going to kill all of your family. We
get all the money.
Yeah. So he has to do, and one particular scene is at the funeral where he's saying well, she's not going to last long, the mother. And Annie, Annie has a gun. And all the time he's like, when are you going to look at me? I mean, obviously, this movie, I saw a tweet once, which said, Killers of the Flower Moon is the darkest film of the year, which has 3 of the funniest moments of the year. And it does, because it has the moment later where he's like, look at me to tell me that you know what I'm saying. When it's like, I'm going out of town for the weekend. I'm going out of town, which is hilarious. And then even darker and even funnier is when what's his cop? One of the evil white guys, and one of the evil white guys, and he's like, so if my children change their name and then they die, and the lawyer just says, you do realize that by telling me this, you're inferring that you're going to kill your children. You go, not if I don't get the money. I'm not going to
do it if it's not legal.
Like the darkest, and every time I watched it twice in theaters, laugh. And it's that incredibly uncomfortable. And in that sense, it contains multitudes. It's a complexity there. It isn't just this, painting of just pure evil. Yeah.
I think it also highlighted just how dire the Indian, the Osage's situation is the fact that these guys are not smart. They aren't William Hale arguably is smart, and even he is quite reckless in the ways that he's going about these things. These are not master criminals. No. They are being quite blatant about how predatory they are, but no one gives enough of a shit to do anything until one of them manages to have a 30-second conversation with the president of the United States.
Well, it's this is the, I mean, I'm sure it, screenwriting, and the book has a great propulsive narrative, but this would surely be an incredibly disappointing detective movie if they did go with that original script. Yeah.
The Jesse Plemons, Tom White, Jesse Plemons' character, he doesn't have to do any digging. I mean, he's figured it out within the first day of being there. Within his first conversation with Ernest Burkhardt, he says, I've already spoken to the justice of the peace.
Yeah.
You know, when he's with the doctor, I've spoken to everyone in town. I
It
am
could
peaceful.
become it like, I mean, obviously De Niro, but like it could be an untouchable sort of film, I guess, where like we know that Capone's awful, but how are we going to get him? But that wasn't really how it went.
But there was so much evidence. It's just that no one had cared enough to look, and I think that's really the like true horror at the core of this movie, is that there is no one to help. There is no one who cares other than the Osage.
I would like to have seen this. I don't think I'm conflating, and I don't think I'm misremembering, but I believe that Tom White wanted to stay down there and do more investigating after Hale, and he was sent. Obviously, Hoover. I mean, how have we never got? I mean, we're not going to get one now if people can't watch this movie without complaining. But when are we ever going to get a really good Hoover movie that just shows the absolute scumbag that he was in every way, shape, or form? And and he was like, no, we found Hale, and we can pin it all on Hale. If you launch an entire investigation, and that you could come up failing. But this was one of the first big cases that the FBI quote unquote solved. And there's a film from the 50s called The FBI Story, where it's James Stewart as Tom White. And this is like 10 minutes of it. And it's a really weird, truncated, like this entire film is in 10 minutes.
The Osage murders, yeah.
And obviously that's what the radio drama plays into later.
Yeah.
And then this is when we get the great scene, the dinner at the Burkhardt, Sunday dinner, and we get Lizzie Q, the mother. Again, Scorsese, this is 50 years after Mean Streets. I know he did Who's That Knocking on My Door before and Boxcar Bertha, but like this is 50 years since Mean Streets, and he's still coming up with new incredibly evocative images and ways to shoot and make films with Thomas Schumacher as editor. And that scene where Lizzie Q is just sat there and then
the owl.
And the owl swooping in and then cutting back and out, very, very effective.
And then the connection later on between the owl and Ernest, as Molly is also dying, it's sort of like this harbinger of death arrives, in traditional kind of Osage worldview, that's what an owl symbolizes. And then Ernest is there in the door, and it's sort of like, he is the guy. He is the death at your doorstep, love. Like,
it's incredible shit.
The killer is in the house.
and then we got this notion that, and Lizzie talks with Molly, and we haven't really talked yet about how sensational Lily Gladstone is here.
I know. Oh, baby. It's just so, she plays Molly so damn well, and she's the smartest person in the room, and yet just has this tragic kind of blind spot for Ernest in a way that almost undoes her.
And I think a big thing about people saying like, oh, we want more Molly, is just because Lily Gladstone is just so magnetic, good. So good and so magnetic that we do want more. And obviously to want to have more would be to completely, for the hardest part is that for the middle hour and half of this movie, as per the truth, she is completely violently incapacitated by the poison and is just writhing in a bed. And I don't want to see the movie where that isn't shown and given the weight and truth that it deserves.
And it makes her journey to Washington so much more impactful. The fact that this is like her dying act is to just desperately reach out to the president for 30 seconds and just like, please God, come down here and help us. Like, we're going to die without, somebody. And
then we get this scene between Lizzie, this moment between Lizzie and Molly, and she's just like, we're all dying because you keep marrying white men. And she has this great love for her daughter Annie, because as wild a girl as she is, she's not married any white guys. I mean, she has a baby with Byron, whatever the mother thinks of that. And then we get this lovely tender moment between mother and daughter, and she's like, "Oh, my wild girl." And then Byron's talking with Ernest. And again, it's another one of these moments of, do you understand what I'm saying? I've got to take Annie home now. Do you understand what that means? Do you understand what I'm saying here? And he's like, yeah, And I've put here believable culpability. Like you can say that Ernest is simply choosing to be naive, or you can believe that he's genuinely naive, and that's an incredible question at the core of this film. But there is a believability to, well, yeah, he said he was going to take her home. Yeah, of course, yeah, I believe it. I believe it. I completely believe it. And then we get the sequence of Annie's corpse being found, and that the sawing of the skull, and that rudimentary early 1900s anatomy where they allegedly can't find the bullet. Presumably they did.
Another funny moment. I probably unintentionally, also horrific, but you chopped off her limbs, cut her up into small pieces, and blended her up.
Yeah.
Well, we were looking for the bullet.
Yeah. and just again that sort of believable culpability of like, you can say these things, and yes, I'm sure that you had the conversation of, well, if we do this with the body, then they won't be able to trace it back to Byron, and that's great, and we can just say that we were looking for the bullet, and sure, in those small rooms that sounds good enough, but when you actually say it in the cold hard light of day,
with someone who's not ready to, with someone who's not in on it or doesn't stand to benefit from it. I mean, I think another thing that just really did such a good job of highlighting sort of the disconnect between like the Midwest and the East Coast, where like civilization has kind of happened, and the Midwest where it's still kind of catching up to the lawlessness of the Wild West, essentially. That moment where Jesse Plemons' character, Tom White, is in the barbershop with Robert De Niro. And he said, well, I've been sent by Harry Truman. He said,
yeah.
And he said, haven't heard of him. He's just going to be like the local judge from down the road. Like, I haven't paid that one off yet, but I'll get to it.
So Big Bill. Well, we all know Big Bill. Yeah, no, wait, Harry Truman, who owns the cattle ranch, and
Harry Truman?
No, the president.
I've never heard of that guy.
I have you been watching this latest series of Fargo?
No, I haven't.
Very, very good. And John Hamm, I mean, this is the thing, isn't it? That's set in 2019, and that's John Hamm as a sort of local sheriff, and that's based off all these guys who went full militia at the end when they tried to tear him down, and this shit is happening right now. The whole sort of local government, and he does the same thing.
Versus federal government sort of thing.
He's Republican. He's Republican in the sense that he likes Trump, but he's not actually. But when it comes down to the law, it's my law and it's my show. And he's just, I mean, I'm ruining the show, but he's just killing people willy-nilly because he's just like, who gives a shit? This is my land. It was a very good series of that show. It's on Amazon Prime. I'd recommend it to everybody. And that's another thing. That's another thing where like we've got incredible media coming out and it's just disappearing. Like 10 hours of John Hamm, Juno Temple, Jennifer Jason Leigh, and another series of Fargo. And I'm not saying that you're ignorant to the media or anything, but like that, who the hell is talking about this new series of Fargo? I don't know anybody. My grandma, who loved all the first four, doesn't even know it's on Amazon Prime. We like
First I'm hearing of it.
Yeah, exactly. And that's understandable. Yeah. And then we get the funeral. And meeting Hale. Oh yeah, the meeting and that we talked about. You must come to me if you know anything. And again, that great on a second watch or even on a first watch by this time. I do want to say I did love the tribal council and the performance by Yancey Redcorn as Chief Bonacastle. Thought it was just fantastic and a nice kind of addition. I liked the tribal council and seeing sort of like that vestige of traditional culture is still like exists within this new paradigm they're all kind of within. There is still the tribal sort of council that comes together and makes these decisions for the community, and it is regrettably the traditions coming against an unstoppable 21st century force that they like, and they have the help of the quote, not even quote unquote Barney McBride is a good white man, but like they have McBride who's like, no, I will use my cleft as a white man to go and try and find something out. I mean, great reveal, I thought.
Stab the death right there in Washington, D.C. before you can even speak to anyone.
And I'm just looking at this now on IMDb. I know, 170,000 reviews, 7.7 out of 10. Just these little things that are getting on my nerves now. I'm really, really starting to. Anyway, and then we get the funeral, and again we get you're charging me Osage prices. These are Osage prices. And it's not, and the funeral director's like, no, I'm not. And he goes, it's not their money. It's not, and again, seeping in now. It's seeping in of people being able to.
The white
accepted.
supremacist kind of capitalist 21st century will find any way it can to extract the money from this community, even this community that has managed to work the system, quote unquote, and managed to find their niche within capital, that in theory should be able to found a very, very successful businesses and run, like oil empires for the rest of time, if capitalism is to be believed, already people are working their way and finding ways to extract the money from this community and get it back into the hands of white people, essentially.
Yeah. And then this is the moment where we get, Scorsese's done this before, where randomly Karen in Goodfellas will start narrating, or even in Wolf of Wall Street, Joanna Lumley, he's trying to have sex with me, or whatever she said. And we get this incredible voiceover with Molly. And it does not do to talk to this man. Evil surrounds my heart. Now, I think in a lesser script and in a lesser film, this could have been a chance to give Lily Gladstone a bigger, quote unquote, scene. And she could have done this monologue out loud and to Ernest or to somebody else. I think it is incredible strength and restraint to have it be voiceover and have her remain stoic and silent, because in absolute truth and honesty, that's exactly what happened. She would not have been able to say, evil surrounds my heart, they tell me to kill these white men, out loud. She wouldn't have been able to. And I do think a lesser film and a lesser script in lesser hands would have done this scene out loud. And that is not the point. The point is that she has this incredible hate in her heart that she's trying to overcome. In the face of absolute death at all turns, and she can't. And we get this incredible voiceover, which I dare say is just as effective. And then we get Bill Smith and Rita, and and we get the private investigator, and he's coming into town. Who you you don't know, but he's very good in the 5th series of Mad Men. He runs Jaguar, and he's a pervert. And he's very good here. And again,
but not a pervert this time.
He's not a pervert this time. He's a good guy, and he's doing the, and again we get the first glimpse of somebody coming into town, and an outsider being like, "Okay, so same Bill Smith.
Obviously, there's something going on here."
Yeah. Same Bill Smith is married to, and Bill Smith at this time is sort of he was a red herring in the book. Obviously, in this film we know a bit more. So, but you could see a world where Hale starts to pin everything on Bill. I think a little, but at this stage, I don't think he has to think. He's not thinking about pinning anything on anybody, because he thinks that he can just do this forever.
He can just get away with it. Yeah.
So he doesn't have to worry about a stooge or a patsy. I'll just kill everybody and that'll be easy.
That comes later.
Yeah, well, yes. And then we get that pool conversation, and then this is where we get, and I don't know how I feel. I think I like it that there's just no big reveal that Ernest has finally turned, and we get him going to Blackie Thompson to try and convince and get him on board to blow up Bill and Rita's house. And there's no big reveal, there's no, I've got you, you're going to meet somebody later who's going to sort it out for you, and then he walks into frame and you're like, oh no, Ernest. Because it's just that slow, trudging. Adam Naiman, a great critic, wrote about how he felt that Scorsese was trying to be, what's the word, where you're really, really tender and empathetic, and He didn't want to be exploitative or whatever, and he felt that, and it was this sort of scene that exemplified how Scorsese was trying to avoid making a thriller to sensationalize the stuff. And so it is instead this sort of slow unfolding of sad, tragic events. You know, there's no quote unquote big reveals.
It is very similar to like a Greek tragedy in a way. You can kind of see the ending coming from a mile away, and it's more just the horror of watching it approach as opposed to like the big reveal of how it's going to happen. It's more like you can see exactly how it's going to happen, and you don't want to watch it happen, but you can't look away as it is going on. You know, you're kind of hoping like something is going to swoop in and stop it all from happening. And in a way, like it's kind of echoes to that sort of point that William Hale is constantly making to Ernest. Like, do you think miracles are like really a thing? They're not. There's no miracle this time. No one's going to step in and save these people. And it's true until the very last moments of the movie. No one is going to step in and save these people. It is a horrible tragedy that you're just going to have to like watch unfold because it is something that happened, you know? And there's no way of like avoiding that or like rewriting it or making, you know, it so that it never happened. It did happen, and you're gonna have to watch it happen. There is nobody coming in.
And then simultaneous to the sort of Tulsa riot sequence where we're at the cinema, we get the Masons Club scene with the paddle.
The paddle, yeah.
And again, the sort of the variety of different traditions that we see and different cultures, and the Masons Club being such a huge, still to this day. I mean, I worked on board a cruise liner and they still have Masons Club meetings, not with paddles.
As far as you know.
As far as I know, sure, I did. Yeah, no, they did always want the door shut behind them. That is true. And this paddling, and it is, you know, you're an infantile boy. We need to get you in line. If you're going to be a part of this scheme, you need to be in line. And you're still focused on the money. This is bigger than the money. And in many ways, although it's never really uttered, for Hale, it probably is big. Do you think it's bigger than the money for Hale? Do you think he has a sort of
grand plan? Well, I mean,
supremacist plan, or do you think it is just the money?
He's the king of the Osage, or he's king of Osage land, whatever. King of the Osage,
king of the Osage Hills. Yeah,
and I mean, I think ultimately it is about the money. I think I think what this movie does a good thing of showing is how people rationalize and justify the decisions that they're making, even when they know that there's a real reason they're doing it. In this case, money, greed, you know, power. You know, they will rationalize it and say, well, I'm doing it for the community. I'm doing it because this money will be better off in my hands because I can run things better. Or, you know, I just like the money, you know, I'm going to take care of my family and that sort of thing. Like I don't think any of these people they all have something that makes it bigger for them, quote unquote. But I think ultimately for William Hale, it is about getting as much money as he can, as much power as he can. It's about that ego of being the king of the Osage Hills. And I think he wants to see himself as like this steward of a beautiful dying people who are just too good for this world. And isn't it tragic how they're all going to have to go away and someone's going to have to run it once they're gone? And, you know, so like,
and I'm sure he'll put up a museum.
Yeah, I'm sure he would be the sort of guy who posted the black square on his Instagram, you know, like without doing any other sort of real act, while also donating to his local police department, you know.
And ballet
he would have he would have used the money to build a museum, and there would have been wonderful, loving tributes, you know, by white people to the beauty that once was.
Well, let's talk about this wonderful character before we take our second break. The character of Henry Roan, played by William Below. Great tragic figure. And again, you know, he gets brought to the doctors and, you know, you're going to kill this Indian, Bill? And how do you know? And they're just laughing and mocking him right in front of. They're just saying out loud, you know what? Oh yeah. How much can we get away? Wink, wink, nudge, nudge. And the tragedy of like, well, what about my melancholy? Nothing but a whiskey won't help. And you know, I'm depressed. You know, my wife's cheating on me with Roy Burge, and what are you doing? And then they have to pull him out of the bank. And again, every opportunity he takes. Okay, so he's got Henry there, Henry's a great soul. He's a good man. He's a good man. I got to take care of him. And there's $2,000 sat right, and almost in the same breath. And also, what is this a chance? This is a chance to get Ernest on side as well.
Yeah. Yep.
That's Molly's first husband. Well, traditional, they were 15, but they were husbands.
I'll make him jealous. Yeah.
And then I can make him jealous. But also I can say, well, she has her secrets, so you can have yours. Justify, so he doesn't have to sit badly on his stomach.
Yeah, you don't have to feel bad for not telling your wife these things. She keeps secrets from you, kiddo.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
so good. So nasty.
And how that all turns out, the Henry Roan stuff turns out with, getting the guy with the mustache. What a great actor he was. Oh God. Yeah, Ty Mitchell as John Ramsey. Getting him on board, and then how does that turn out? He's friends. They're friends. They end up friends, and he's like, every day, eventually I had to do it, and he just shoots him in the back of the head,
in the front of the face. Yeah.
Well, yeah, sorry, not in the back of the head. Pivot again.
Shoots him. Yeah. Another.
The front is the front. The back is the back.
This is supposed to be a suicide, you dumb bell. You didn't tell him to leave the gun. I don't know why. I told him to leave the gun. I told him.
Yeah, and it is that thing of and it's just incredibly complex stuff that contains. This movie it
has multitudes going on.
Dark as all hell and incredibly powerful. It was Kelsey Morrison. That's it. Kelsey Morrison was the guy who was dancing at the. We'll talk about this before we move on. From Annie, I love that the movie is full of these little moments with great supporting actors, and the taxi driver that we get the flashback when they're talking about Annie's last day, and she's like,
I'll tell you who did it.
Yeah, she's like, I'm going to have a baby, and she's like, you're really? And he's just got that soft affect. He's like, oh, wonderful. Oh, that's great. And yeah, great stuff. And then obviously it all slowly but surely comes to a head. And we will discuss that in our third and final part after our second break, as it all comes to the ultimate tragic conclusion that we all obviously could see coming, and that's the slow burning train, and that is that. And then, not that it's been a cheerful film up until this point, but it then becomes a slow unraveling of natural course of events.
I did enjoy watching their plots kind of come undone in a way, and it is refreshing to see somebody come in from the outside and point out just how ridiculously obvious and just plain old cruel and stupid they've been throughout the whole movie.
Yeah. Well, we talked about DC, but I talk about the explosion itself, that incredible moment of them going to bed, and then the huge explosion blowing out the window and blowing out all of these bulbs that everybody had put out originally to ward off the death. And everybody goes down into the shelter, and then you have the one of the women in the house screaming, it's like Tulsa all over again. And then he goes out, whose house is it? It's Bill and Rita's. And that incredible slow realization almost on Ernest's face of, what am I doing? I'm trapped on this trip.
Where does this end?
What did you think it was going to be? Exploding up your brother-in-law and your sister-in-law, and what did you think it was? What sort of reaction did you think you were going to have? And
it's just a tragic, kind of horrific moment, and I think also paints the fact that I think Ernest is both naive and not naive. I think he understands in the moment that he is essentially killing somebody, but he doesn't think through the further implications of what that will mean. It's like, well, in that moment, Annie was probably going, Annie was probably going home to get murdered. My sister-in-law was probably going home to get murdered. but he doesn't think of like the impact of that on his wife or himself or the community. It's just like, well, that's gonna uncle's gonna take care of that, and then I don't know, it means we're gonna get some money coming our way, and I like that.
He also doesn't plan out the logistics of what if his wife is accidentally over at the house. And,
Yeah.
he says to her, "I don't want you going out. You're so sick. I don't want you going out."
You've systematically killed off the entire rest of her family. What do you think is eventually going to happen to your wife? Like, and the fact that he's giving her the medicine throughout, he says insulin. To the very end, he thinks he was giving her medicine, which I personally believe to be true to a degree. I don't think Ernest ever realized that he was being given anything other than something to help his wife.
I mean, it's coming up, but there is the incredibly beautiful, haunting hell, quote unquote, scene, shot beautifully, like this whole film is by Rodrigo Prieto. And Rodrigo Prieto, 2 in 1 year, he does this and Barbie cinematography in 2 complete polar opposite movies, both visually stunning. And that scene of, again, starts with a darkly comedic beat. That's Bill Hale's reg. He bought an insurance policy on that farm for me yesterday, and he's hired
some work to do tomorrow, Mr. Insurance Man.
He's got that. He's hired like 10 people to just burn up the farm and chop up the farm, and so he can claim back all of this money. And
what is the name of the song that plays during that sequence? The sort of like dirge.
I think it's Muddy. I think it's Muddy Waters. I'll get it for you now.
It was all I could think while I was watching that sequence was, this song's on the Voyager 1 spacecraft.
And is it this one? No, it's not that. It's
that one.
Yeah. They don't have it. They don't have it on the thing. I know.
Oh.
I believe it's Muddy Waters, but I could be completely wrong. Killers of the Flower Moon playlist.
Strange. I thought it was a very fitting piece to pick. It was my favorite song. Favorite use of a song there.
So much great music.
Sorry, I've derailed you completely here.
Dark Was the Night by Blind Willie Johnson.
Yes. So good.
And then it is that scene where we get Ernest sort of realizing to some extent, and he feels almost biblical. It's his trial to bear. He tastes the poison himself, and to see, to kill himself, to taste the poison, to prove to himself that he's not poisoning, whatever he's doing it for. And Molly's just writhing there in complete illness, and it's incredibly evocative. And hanging over it is these burning embers and Hale's watchful eye.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, fantastic. And I love, it leads up to a line later on that I really liked, where Tom White is essentially leading Ernest into the courtroom for the first time, and just kind of mentions to him, narrow is the way. Narrow is the way to heaven, narrow is the eye, of a needle, essentially. So it's like, hey, you've, been on the path to hell. If you want to climb out, it's not an easy journey, but like, it is worthwhile. Narrow is the way, sort of thing.
And now we get the Tom White arrival, and I'm down to see what about these murders. What about them?
What about these murders?
Well, who's been doing them?
Did them?
And just great stuff. And Jesse Plemons is brilliant as always. Not a particularly showy part, but he's as wonderful as always. And it's also around this time we get that
he plays that kind of inquisitive, out of town detective role very, very well, doesn't he?
And it's around this time that we sort of get, it's very similar in a way to Goodfellas, where the De Niro character's paranoia and trust eventually gives way to a sort of montage later where he's like, I can't trust anybody, I've got to kill everybody. And he's like, and he deals with Blackie Thompson, giving him like a bank robbery that is obviously going to be fixed. And then he deals with I'm saying Blackie Thompson, but it's not. Blackie Thompson's the explosives guy.
Is it
No, Blackie Thompson is that guy.
No, not Kelsey Morrison, because Kelsey Morrison ends up testifying.
Oh man, AC Kirby. Anyway, the explosives guy, and he's like, okay, well, yeah, go to this place, go to this like department store. It's going to be, two white guys and a black guy, and he's like, okay, and then he goes to when he opens the ballet school, and he's like, watch out tomorrow morning, and this is where we see the scheming working without fault. And it's that sort of thing of, oh, we understand. We can. We've been seeing the grand scheme, but even in the tiny things, Hale is very good. But,
and we see him drop all pretense. We see him drop all pretenses of doing this for any sort of altruistic reasons. He is full blown like mafia boss in this moment. It's like time to wrap up loose ends. They're on my ass now. And
then back to back with this, we get the descent also, and we get the fussing and the flustering and the paranoia, because then the walls are closing in. He goes to the insurance man. It's been due 2 weeks. I want my Henry Roan money. And again, incredibly darkly funny, incredibly bizarre and sad. And
he's been dead 3 months.
He's been. You keep saying Denver. This isn't a Denver problem.
This is Fairfax County.
and the care in any way, shape, or form is completely gone, and he is simply money. And he's like, I want my Henry Roan money. And it's such an incredible line that contains.
I think that scene should sum up for anybody who's wondering, did William Hale, what was he really after in the end? Why was he doing this? It was for the money. He dressed it up for himself in the pretense of being the shepherd of the Osage people. But the truth is, he has murdered and killed all of these people because he sees them as their head price, as how much money they would be worth dead to him, And the only people that are still alive that are worth more alive to him right now than they are dead.
Yeah, it's these FBI scenes, and also that do make me I love what we get, but there is a world where I could see in many ways a full film. I would love to see more with the undercover, with it's great in the book. I would have
loved to see a movie from Tatanka Means' point of view, John Wren's point of view.
Yeah. But then you get to the point of what would that film be, very, very, very great scenes, and then we burn the ranch, and then it's not long before we get the arrests and the interrogation, and then it's just slowly crumbling, and he barely holds up for long. And they make him stand, was it just you, or were you with your brother, and they're just waiting for him to crack, and then he gives it all up. And
I love the quote in the radio show, that damn boy could have just kept his trap shut. We could have all made out right now.
And there's this whole blame it all on Ernest, because he gave them all away. And again, whether it is a biblical thing of he sees this as this only. I do believe that in his naivete or whatever, he believes that he will get Molly in the end, and he will, if I give up now, and if I tell the truth now, and if I just say everything, maybe she'll come back. Maybe everything will work out, and I'll be with Molly. And obviously that is not the case, and she does not go back to him at all. And then the slow building up of this, the arrest of the guy who killed Henry Roan, and grab your pencils, and that great it's sort of like a mic drop moment, and then we're building. And Hale, again, turning himself in. I heard I'm arrested for murder. You wanna take me in? And no, you're okay. Do the cuffs. I don't care. I'm innocent. I'm innocent as a newborn baby, maybe even more. And
the power play of the local police that know him, who have been sent to arrest him, like not wanting to put the handcuffs on him.
Yep.
He says, "It's all right, son. Go ahead." You know.
Yep.
Okay, do the whole show, the whole song and dance. I'm no better
here.
than any other man.
Yo, wait till we'll laugh about this one day, and you know that's the whole vibe. And you know the sheriff is part of that meeting later. Where, you know, you dumb boy, that meeting. You know the sheriff. You know, and well, anyway, we'll get to that in a second. And there is a sort of. I was talking to somebody the other day about how they felt the final half an hour dragged because Leo said he was going to confess, changes his mind, then tries to confess again, and there is one of those things of the unfortunate back and forth and quote unquote unnarrative way that in real life that those events panned out, because he did have a come to Jesus moment, and then he came back to the devil, pardon the pun, and then he had another come to Jesus moment when his daughter died. And yeah, we have this great, you know, meeting. We get Lithgow in court, and he's interviewing Blackie Thompson, and he's like, "Yeah, no. When was the last time you talked with Hale? You got a note to me the other week saying what? To kill Ernest to try and get him out." And go, "And how did that go?" "Well, I'm still talking to you, aren't I?" And the just again scheming to the very, very, very end.
Yeah. Oh God, and I love John Lithgow's performance as well. Just brilliant. I think what was the name of the woman he kept repeating? Anna Brown. When you went to kill Anna Brown,
yeah,
you know you were plotting with Hale to kill Anna Brown. Did you pay him money to kill Anna Brown?
Yeah.
He just that over and over again.
You know, this was a person that you killed, not just some money, not just some land, not just some real estate.
Some Indian. Her name was Anna Brown.
Yeah,
and you killed her. Like you didn't do a favor for your uncle. You didn't just talk to some guy. You did these things to kill this woman.
And
just a piece of dialogue, I thought.
And the incredible editing of Thelma Schumacher, if we hear it all, we hear it all, we hear it all, and then after the fact, we see it all. Just one solid take, and we see it in reality. Because to hear it's one thing, but to actually see it, and very effective choice. And you could have done it before. You could have, but it felt right. And then we get the meeting at the house, you know, and who's at the house? Oh, the sheriff, and you know, Marty is, you know, and this is David Whiting from Salloway Oil, and this is Thomas Carruthers from Cression Oil, and you go, okay, so the oil men are involved now, you know, and
the oil money is here now. The whole local government is basically here, you know.
Everybody has a vested interest in, you know,
keeping Hale from going down. Yeah.
Yeah. They beat you and they tortured you. No, they didn't. They didn't do nothing like that. They beat you.
They beat you.
They beat you and they tortured you. And wow, great stuff.
I thought that was a brilliant, because I don't know. I thought Brendan Fraser's performance there was great, because the lawyer knows that Ernest is too stupid to explain to him, look, you need to tell people that they beat you. So instead, he's just going to plant it in his brain. Like, they beat you, didn't they? They did. Yeah. Oh, God, how terrible of them. And I just thought that was brilliant. Like,
he's very good. He's very clearly the bombastic, over-the-top, polar opposite to Lithgow's complete analytical, you know. And what happens when we first meet Fraser? I demand to speak to my client. He has been gone for 2 months. And Lithgow is trying. And Lithgow is trying to bring it back to procedure, and he's like, "This is completely out of procedure."
The rules are on her. Yeah.
And he goes, "I demand to speak to my client." And then we go to Leo, who is completely flustered, and he's like, "Is this man your client?" He's not. I
know.
I'd be willing to talk to him. And you're like, oh, God almighty, this guy. And then his daughter dies, and we get that.
His son dies.
No, his daughter dies because Cowboy's still alive. His son Cowboy.
Yes.
and then she's with God now. She's with God now, Ernest, and then oh Lord,
Lord.
yeah, and he's praying, and then and then Ernest takes the stand, and
He takes the deal. I think he realized like just everything he had thrown away. He was not the good husband and father that he wanted to think of himself as, because I think that's what he was ultimately telling himself the whole time is I'm doing all of these things to facilitate me being a better husband and father, more able to take care of my family, sort of thing. And I think he realized that like he was throwing all of that away, in fact, by continuing down this path, essentially. And he did. He lost it in the end, and rightfully so.
And I love her, and his big stand confession, cross-examination comes down to
that he really loved his wife.
I love her. I love her. I ever since I picked her up in a taxi, I love her. I love her. And then Molly comes to see him, and I nearly said backstage, back behind the courtroom, and she has one question: what was in the shots, Ernest? And she is giving him that last chance.
To be honest,
she doesn't confront him. She does confront him, but she doesn't, confront him with any of the direct, what was in the shots? And then half flabbergasted, half naive, half truthful, half lying, half whatever you want to say. There's so many things he could mean. And he goes, insulin. And she just stands and goes.
Yeah.
And the movie could have ended, cut to black there, and you'd be like, wow, drop the mic. Okay, Marty. But it doesn't. And we conclude with this radio play, sequence. A lot of movies would have done maybe a few title cards, Molly died at 87 or whatever, but no, this is a visual medium as much as this is a radio program. And Scorsese does this incredible thing of, the last time we heard this story was the FBI story, the film, and there were such radio programs around the time, funded by the FBI, sponsored by the FBI, sponsored by Lucky Strike,
by the FBI, written by the FBI,
and to spread the quote unquote truth of how great the FBI was and all that sort of thing.
How good cops are, yeah.
And
America's first propaganda.
And we get the facts of what came of everybody, and Hale's letters. They know I'm a true friend to them. And then we get Jack White from the White Stripes showing up for a role, and he does this, this cod Indian accent, Osage accent, and he does the big voice, and it's like okay, right. And then we're looking at how stories have been told through the years, and then even we can't get away from the Lucky Strike advertisement. Hey, you gotta get a line of that Lucky Strike, and then it all builds to this obituary. And in the obituary for Molly Carr, Bread, and then Marty slowly walks forward, and he solemnly gives this obituary. And then at the very end, he talks about, and he says, there was no mention of the murders.
There was no mention.
And it just winded me. It winded me again this morning. I really do. I think it's incredibly powerful. All of is it whitewash? Is it whitewashing to have her entire life be told just through these murders, or is it the more dangerous to never mention the murders at all? Is this movie sensationalist? I'm just saying these questions. I don't think it's any of these things. Is this movie sensationalist or overly graphic or gratuitous in its violence, or is it the exact sort of educational material, educational publicity that it could be?
Quite honestly, I did not see any of the violence as gratuitous. If anything, it was quick, it was sharp, it was gritty and awful, yes, but it was never like something that was lingered on overly. It was, I don't know, it was almost like just intercut with the plot. It was just, the fact is, this person was killed and here's what it looked like. And now we're going to see the repercussions of that. I mean, probably the most gratuitous bit of killing was maybe the stabbing in Washington, D.C. And then obviously the sawing open of Anna's skull was pretty rough. But again, it was
it wasn't lingered on or like the focus. It was just a fact of the scene in a way, and it just was like interspersed very sharply and then gone.
Again, I saw criticism that said that, you know, by the end they felt desensitized to the violence. And I'm going, I certainly did not feel desensitized when we saw Anna's murder in the courtroom and we saw that flashback. I certainly did not feel that.
I don't know. Every single death felt devastating to me, especially through Lily Gladstone's performance. I mean, the wails that came out of her every time she like found yet another dead family member were like heart-wrenching, you know, like,
yeah.
I don't know. I wasn't desensitized to it by the end. I thought it was, and I mean, even if you are desensitized to it, then like you are sort of the problem in a way. Like,
yeah,
you're proving William Hale's point right, that it'll just become another everyday tragedy. You're letting it become another ordinary everyday tragedy in that way. By, you know, you're proving him right. You know, the fact is, it was overwhelmingly like sad amounts of violence enacted upon these people, and you have to be sensitive to that fact, I guess.
It's I loved May December, and that's probably my film of the year. But for me, I think Lily Gladstone is it's Natalie Portman is very close behind, but for me, it's the performance of the year. And to be honest, have we ever had? I mean, we probably have in Oscar history, but like, I mean, it's not the nominations that we've got, unfortunately. But Charles Melton, Robert Downey Jr., De Niro, yeah, Gosling for Barbie, and Mark Ruffalo for Poor Things is an incredible, you know, and Sterling K. Brown, who actually got in.
Quite frankly, it's a bit of a snub that Margot Robbie wasn't put in as.
Well, that's another thing, yeah. I mean, we don't have to litigate like fucking American Ferrera.
Right, Ryan Gosling's performance was amazing, but come on, like the fact that Margot Robbie got nothing, no recognition, or you know, nomination for Barbie is kind of ridiculous.
And to bring it back to the film that we're talking about. Could you say this? No. I just mean I brought the Oscars up. I brought up May December, but like, could you say the same thing for Leo in this film?
I thought it was a brilliant performance from him yet again. I don't think there was necessarily anything about it that made it stand out as compared to his other brilliant performances. Like I think it was another standout performance from Leonardo DiCaprio.
Yeah.
Which at this point, I guess I've come to expect of him. You know, like.
But we could say the same thing about De Niro.
I would say the same thing. Like both brilliant performances that suited the roles perfectly and the movie. I would have expected nothing less from either one of them, I guess.
Let's end on
Leonardo DiCaprio and Robert De Niro is a trio that I figure, I'm going to get a pretty excellent performance and some great dialogue.
Do we end on this note of, are we taking Martin Scorsese for granted in his final phase? I don't want to end so negatively, but like, are we taking for granted that our quote unquote greatest living filmmaker is still in his old age has made this incredible epic film, and you know, people are like, oh, it's too long, you know. I guess he shouldn't have directed it because he's white.
Of how cinema is going to change in the age of content and short prepackaged kind of information thrown in your face constantly. And is there a world going forward for movies like Martin Scorsese makes? I don't know. I hope so.
Yeah.
I hope there's still room for cinema, you know, really, really good cinema, you know, proper like good movies that have this level of like writing and care and detail put into them. I think it's going to be some changes. I don't, you know, there'll never be another one like Scorsese, but that doesn't mean there won't be some good stuff. I mean, Bong Joon-ho is not going anywhere anytime soon. You know, there's some, there's good.
Yeah, there's hundreds of people, but this is, and I think it comes down to this, and it's one hell of a point to end on. But people talking about how this should have been made by an Indian filmmaker. The film that we have received with the actors that are involved and the huge budget that this was made with, and the absolute directorial vision and being allowed to be 3.5 hours long, I personally do not see it as a bad thing that one of our greatest living filmmakers was not obsessed, was infatuated's the wrong word. Taken in by this story and this truth and this tragedy, and chose to make this one of his films and used his incredible resources to bring this story to light. And
I think it brings more attention. I think it brings more attention in a real way to like a very underserved and misrepresented and unheard group of people, you know, from a man who has quite a lot of influence and can dictate quite a lot of attention just by doing what he does, you know.
Yeah.
Choosing to tell certain stories as opposed to other ones. I think this was a great story for him to tell, and I thought he told it well.
And we've not even, oh my God, I can't believe it. Probably my favorite scene in the entire film is the scene of Lizzie Q going to the afterlife. And and just that is all of his spiritualism. This movie feels like a crossroads of all of his spiritual movies and his religious movies, and then all of his more violent and tragic movies. And it just feels like this incredible confluence of concepts and ideas. I hope he makes a film tomorrow, but this does feel like a tremendous culmination of his entire career.
And it wouldn't be a bad thing if it is his last movie necessarily. Like, this is a hell of a movie to go out on, and I think that time will vindicate it in people's eyes. I think we live in an age where a lot of discussion happens without a lot of nuance or care, very quickly, and people are expected to take a stance right away on a lot of things. I think time will show that this movie was, really something special. Whether or not Martin lives to see that time, I don't know, but I think we certainly will. So.
Yes, and in the meantime, I'll be there.
And in the meantime, you'll be championing the cause and being canceled every minute for it.
I don't think I've said anything cancelable. I've been okay.
No, I don't think you have yet.
Yes. I agree. I think it's. I don't want to say the word lazy because it's not. I don't want to conflate. So many years of what people are feeling and what they feel. But can we not say anything else other than it should have been shorter and it shouldn't have been directed by a white guy? Is that the only thing that we can? And we shouldn't have shown the violence. Are these really the three sticking points that we're going to have for this incredible work of film?
The internet, loves a negative blurb much more than like a sort of nuanced discussion of a thing, and it's a lot easier to say it was shit than it is to explain why it was so good,
Yeah, it takes, in the words of Morrissey, it's so easy. I said this the other day. I think I said this in the Maestro episode. I keep quoting Morrissey. It's so easy to laugh. It's so easy to hate. It takes strength to be gentle and kind. And you know what? It takes a lot of strength to just, be sincere.
Amen.
Amen. Here's to Morrissey.
Fringe is dead. Fringe is dead, and I'm still breathing.
Yeah. Well, David, that was absolutely wonderful. Thank you very, very much. And I will, yes, of course. And right, let's end here. This is the 2023 Spotlight series, but it is coming as a lead up to Oscar season. The Irishman and Gangs of New York, I believe, both got 10 nominations and won nothing. Wow. Do you think this will be the exact same situation for Killers of the Flower Moon?
Almost certainly, yeah.
I think it's not. I think Oppenheimer is going to win Best Director and Best Film.
I think Oppenheimer, Barbie, a lot of other movies are going to sweep this year. It was a tough year to for competition, Do
you think? I think there is only two hopes to pin on: Lily for Best Actress and Thelma Shoemaker for editing. In the case of editing, I think it could very easily go to the wonderful, brilliant editing of Jennifer Lame in Oppenheimer. And I think it could.
Yeah.
And I mean, Best Actress is a very tight race between Lily, Emma Stone for Poor Things, Carey Mulligan for Maestro. That's and now that Margot's not there, Annette Bening's not going to win for Nyad. She was like pretty good in Nyad, but not a great film. And yeah, I think I hope of the nominations, I'm Lily all the way. I have to say, I loved Carey Mulligan. You have hate in your heart. And I loved Emma Stone. I am Bella Baxter. Have you watched Poor Things yet?
I can't say that I have, no. I need to get around to it, though. I've been told.
it's unfortunately my sort of one of the year that I just can't get behind, I'm afraid. Sorry, everybody.
I'll be interested to. I've got to give it a watch now.
Very good. It is good,
you
but
have a negative review of.
yeah.
I'm more curious.
Yeah. No. I overall though, it's been an incredible year for film, and one of those such films was Killers of the Flower Moon. Thank you very much, David.
Thank you, Tom.
Ba 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 ba.